I asked if you're going to start recording.
I'm not. I'm not gonna start recording. And I wish that real life was as easy as Google Hangouts. You literally just click a button that says "Go Live." If it were only that easy. Welcome to Hacking Business Technology. This is episode number 98. It's hard to imagine that we've been doing this for almost 2 years now.
Crazy.
Where the time goes, I don't have any idea.
Some valuable content just shrunk into 2 years.
I would love to review actually 100 episodes and determine what kind of nuggets or which episodes are the best. I just wish that I had the time. If you'd like to make some money reviewing podcasts, please email me at hosts@hackbiztech.com.
It actually really mandatory for every MBA graduate to go back and watch each episode.
There we go. I like that. We should propose that to some college institution. It would be kind of cool to do a video montage of like our best lines. That would be really sweet. Just have like a 20-minute clip. You know how they do for weddings? They go and shoot your 2-3 day event, and then they like come up with a 10-minute clip. I'm like, all right, that's pretty good.
And it's hard. It's like sometimes we say, well, what are we going to talk about this week? And I find it hard because I want to talk about something that we're not always talking about. Yet some of the basic things that we've talked about have been some of the most vital things for people to hear.
Yeah.
I forget how just immature most organizations are, and just how poorly they run their IT projects, and just how badly they spend on their finances and things like that.
Well, it's a spectrum, and this is something that vendors struggle with, which all three of us are technically employees of, is that broad spectrum of people that are all the way back to like, oh my gosh, COBOL programming, IBM I-Series, AS400 stuff, and then all the way up to some of the more innovative companies like Amazon or Facebook or Target or tons of examples of that. That spectrum is so difficult, even in simple functions like sales, marketing, support. That huge spectrum of customers makes scaling a vendor organization really difficult.
Right.
Scaling of your customers, yeah, and because there's, going back I think to one of our other podcasts, right? It's very hard when you have the shareholder to respond to, but then the actual customer of your organization to respond to, and you're accountable to, because that can actually result in two completely different approaches in terms of how you implement new ideas, you innovate, your pace of innovation.
And there's value in saying we're only going to hit this portion of the spectrum. Someone big like KPMG who's doing services for a lot of companies, they need to be able to scale up rapidly for large companies and scale down for small companies, and they probably don't say no to a lot of work. But yeah, that spectrum just makes it difficult. I don't know. It's something I think about a lot.
And I think one thing that we do, even as a firm, I think what's interesting is the concept of big bets, right? So I think how we've tried to challenge that spectrum or deal with it is every year we go, let's choose 4 big bets, right? Let's look at everything we have, where are we going to focus? And then every year they go back and they say, okay, well, which big bets are working? Which ones do we stop investing in? Are there new big bets? Because I think it's kind of jack of all trades, master of none, right? You have to be really selective, and I think that's important for a lot of companies. If you want to be successful, I think a critical element is to be able to identify and focus on that specific area of a spectrum, and be willing to let go of something that you may not have recognized early on as that big bet, but you gotta focus, and you have to choose something or start somewhere, aim at something,
Yeah. And the reality is that we're making small bets every day. Individual contributors are saying, well, I'm going to try this approach for writing this document or this approach for knowledge management. And it would be beautiful to be able to capture that sort of thing. It's sort of like you're the bookie of the organization. What risks are people taking? And how did it go? Did it go well or not? And if it went well, let's report on it and see if other people could also do well.
Well, some of there's been tools in the marketplace that actually have tried to allow you to look at that and see where your costs are actual adding value. PMI has this concept of earned value of a project.
Earned value management.
So, in tools like Clarity's project portfolio management used to take the earned value analysis up to a kind of cloud graph that would look at these concentric circles, and it would show you these sets of activities are actually affecting 4 or 5 projects. So not only are they high value to the project, but they're high value across projects. So we have to keep doing those things. And then you'd work out from the centric point of value towards the outer edges and say, well, these things over here, they're not as valuable for us to be doing those things. It's just hard. It's hard to do it because it required people to, like, on a daily basis or an hourly basis, be putting in their timesheets and logging their activity against stuff. And no one does that, right? So the data has to roll up, and no one wants to do the hard work.
Or is it that no one wants to do it because it's not as easy as hitting that go live button?
Oh, I love how Baron was there. He looked great.
That is seriously an epic frozen picture of Matt. I love it. But yeah, so I wonder if even our recording is stalled as a result. But either way, assuming we're still live, no, I would agree. But I think, why are they challenged to, or why are they reluctant to put in that effort? I think it's because we still have so much complexity. I need to use Clarity for PPM and time tracking. I need to use Remedy or ServiceNow for all of my service management stuff and my incidents. I need to use Jira to track my defects and enhancements I'm working. It's awful.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I give a presentation on that. I call it the water-fail methodology, and I show requirements going into one tool, testing going into another tool, project going into a tool, release going into a tool, production event data going to different tools, incident support goes into different tools. Yeah, so that's definitely one piece of it. But I think even above that, though, for it's accountability. We live in a world where I was talking with a colleague this morning who works for a very large financial services company, and they just acquired another insurance company. 2 people have quit because they don't want to go through this project of integration and ruin their personal life. Everybody else is kind of staying around, but he's looking at the team that's left over and saying, these are all the people who don't like to be held accountable. These are not the people that I want, but they seem to be able to shirk their level of accountability by staying out of the radar, by staying off these systems, by not logging in these systems and not putting their data in. They've never been, called to the table for their lack of performance because they're not being measured.
People will love to stay under their rock and stay under the radar and do their thing for as long as they can. No one's gonna, if it works for them and they can do their thing and nobody's asking questions or holding them accountable, they'll be happy because people don't like to change.
And it's funny because I was reading this PwC survey and it was talking about in 2018 that most of the everyday workers, the kind of line workers, their priorities and their tasks would be assigned by what they're calling robo-bosses. Analytics or requests would come in, and through artificial intelligence, they'll be prioritized the task that needs to be done, and they'll be assigned it, and once it's finished, they'll go to the next assignment. But the reality is I say that's never going to happen by 2018. Because these line workers, and most manufacturing that I know, I mean, they're just starting to get to the point where they wear scanners on their wrist, or they're, tracking their systems into some digital system. They're not even close to provide kind of quantifiable data about the level of priority or the value or the risk associated with their task, right?
We are so good at collecting data. We are so not good at analyzing it or understanding which data points are correct, right? I mean, I would agree with you. It would be very surprising if we get there in 2018 because you need to collect it. It needs to be analyzed. Then I can drive knowledge. Then I can, lead to that wisdom. But if we haven't figured it out as humanoids, how are we going to program it for a robot if we have no idea how to analyze that data or collect it? And I would argue even understand which data points we should be collecting, because I still see that there are 555 global reports in a service management system that makes me cringe.
Right. And our expectations of what automation's quality should be is so unrealistic. You know, we expect, my dad and I were talking about this. He was telling me that some automatic driving car didn't stop when a truck pulled in front of this guy.
Yes, the Tesla.
Yeah. And it's like, well, wait a second, you know, the reality is if you look at automated driving cars quality compared to regular humans, it's so much higher level, right?
Oh yeah,
Then
it was that actual report said that there was 130 million successful journeys completed before that incident happened.
right. And then you compare that to, okay, well, what if we just had the automated cars for like young drivers or for drunk drivers or people who are really tired? Then compare the stats, right? The stats would be astronomically different in level of,
Completely
right?
agree.
But yet, oh, automated cars are going to fail. And it's
Yeah.
like, it's fail. So,
Yeah, we just put it into a big bucket. Well, it's kind of like some of the recent outages, right? The Amazon Web Services had an outage. Oracle had an outage. Just because it's gone to the cloud, I think there's this expectation that everything should be up 100% of the time.
right.
Stuff does fail. I mean,
Breaks that life.
I think the Amazon Web Services one, it was a storm or a lightning strike hit a PD. I don't even remember what it was because I think it was last week or even maybe 2 weeks ago. But then you get all this backlash. Should we be putting everything to the cloud? Hey, that's the first incident after what? After how many, right? And we're so quick to paint the brush.
Right. How fast was their restoration? That's the key too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. How resilient are they? Absolutely.
There, I mentioned this on the podcast a couple of weeks ago when I was doing a solo show about the chaos engineer from Netflix, and when they were coming up with Chaos Monkey, and then they were calling a new one called Chaos Kong that was taking down certain cloud regions, and then they called it Latency Monkey because then they needed another simulator that would test the latency when certain regions would go down, or slowness with caching systems or failover caching systems. But it was really interesting when he talked about what drove this was not so much to test their high availability, but it's to learn where there wasn't enough resilience built into their infrastructure.
There you go.
Because